Once again, that's me. I'm wearing reindeer antlers. I know I look ridiculous. I currently work in a small town, Auburn, which is between Bay City and Midland. My email address and Twitter are there. I am on both frequently. In fact, I'm probably more frequently on Twitter. So why maker programs if you're a solo librarian? Kids are naturally curious, and so are adults. They're going to be drawn to figuring out how things work and how to make it work better or different or newer or many of the things you've already heard today, and inviting them to tear apart or explore the pieces that make something up and create something new out of something they had never considered before is probably the easiest way to engage even reluctant participants. One of my favorite ways of getting maker programming started was to just go out and sit in the youth area and start doing something, start tearing something apart or making something new, and let kids ask questions and observe while it was going on, and pretty soon I had a room full of participants. Maker projects are pretty easy to let run at their own pace. When you're a solo librarian, you may be doing room discipline, you may be running the program, you may be trying to keep an eye out for people who might need readers advisory. You might be doing a whole host of things all at once. So once you get maker programs started, frequently you can have those opportunities to step away if you need them. They also encourage those who grasp the concept quickly to help those who still need assistance. If you have a more informal schedule, uh, you can teach the first group and then ask the first group to teach your second or third or fourth group. That reinforces the learning for that first group and empowers them to feel like they've really made the project their own. And peer-to-peer learning has a lot of benefits as well. So the first quick and dirty maker project is slime. Everyone loves slime. All ages love slime. From the very youngest, I've run this program with as young as 2 years old to the very oldest, and I'll show you on the next slide the oldest group I've run this with. And there's lots of different ways you can talk about slime. You can talk about oobleck and how it's a solid versus a liquid for younger kids, non-Newtonian fluids if you're with older kids, and then you can start talking about the actual chemical processes, like how different borax slimes work. I don't know if you guys have heard the lump of spaghetti explanation for how slime works, but that's a really good one. I can answer questions about that if there are any. It also lends itself to experimentation and play. And play is a really important aspect of making to me. That aspect of fun that comes out in the exploration. It's also great to showcase how one or two small changes can massively affect the outcome. Think of all the various kinds of slime recipes that have come across your radar just from being on the internet. Just changing what ingredient brings the borax into a glue-based slime, for instance, changes the texture of the slime, and adding things like shaving cream can make it fluffy. If you add more borax, you can make almost a hard bouncy ball texture. So you can talk about the scientific method and reinforce kind of that iterative trial and error of making and science in general. So this is a video that I'm hoping works. This was the oldest group I've ever run the slime project with. I took some slime to a local cigar shop. You'll see some people smoking, and I just took it and was playing with it, and they started doing this all on their own. So that was just a really brief illustration, but we used this just a regular batch of contact solution and clear glue galaxy slime, and as we passed it around, they just started to play to discover what the limits of this slime were and to talk to each other about how it could be used and how it could be changed and different ways that they had made slime in the past or that they might try in the future. This was a group of 40 to 70-year-olds sitting around just where they hang out. So these kind of projects are the kinds that self-start and can be really useful in a solo library setting. Now let's see if it lets me. The second project is circuit projects. These are really easy paper circuit projects that I've been talking about. Making it something that the kids already understand, like a greeting card or wall art, something they've drawn, and then using a medium like tape or wire or ink, materials they're familiar with, to introduce this idea of circuitry and electricity that will continue through an enormous number of maker projects. That familiarity with the materials is really important when you don't have a lot of time to explain new things. This project also has a great aha moment. It's not really slowly progressing like slime. It's kind of not slime, and then it is slime a little bit, and then it's slime, and it's more of a spectrum of dumbness. Whereas with this, there is very literally a moment where things light up after all of your problems have been solved. It can do a lot to bolster confidence in making skills. All right. Stomp rockets are my third one. These are a favorite summer project, or if you've got some outdoor space that can be used. If you have a flat roof and not a lot of outdoor space, you may want to reconsider this because the rockets do go quite high. Everything you need can be gotten at your local hardware store. It's just PVC pipe and joints and PVC pipe insulator. That's it. That's what you make the rockets out of, is the insulator. And so the kids can design their own version of the Stomp Rocket launcher if you want to give them a bigger challenge, or they can just build according to your design. It lets them work together for part of it in order to build the launcher, and then they all build their own rocket. So there is some element of individual creativity as well. I'm sure you guys have heard about this several times today, but this is one of my favorites, the Junk Box Challenge. We all get knickknacks and bits and bobs that we don't always know where they come from. It's a great place to teach about creative reuse. Kids will often, and adults will often, find ways to reuse things that even I haven't thought of. One of my favorite ways to approach this is to give a theme, houses or things that go or monsters, and watch what people come up with. If you have an older group, you can pass out specific problems to solve along with design constraints to give them an idea of how construction works in real life. So the pictures that I have on here are actually from a workshop at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh that I attended a few years ago. And it was a group of librarians and educators from around the country that we were given certain restrictions. Ours had to be spherical and it had to bounce. And we were given reign over a huge variety of junk boxes. And this is what we came up with. Whether it's any good or has any useful purpose, I don't know, but it was a lot of fun to make. And even those of us who spend our careers working with the public to make learned a lot about making in this. If you are struggling to come up with different themes or ideas, Drawbees, which is listed on this slide, actually has a really good deck of cards that has different levels of design challenges just written right on them, so that you can have your participants solve problems or build to a theme or anything in between. And number 5 is egg drop engineering. Yes, that is a fire truck. We invited the local fire department at one of my previous libraries to come help us do the egg drop. The budget method of this program is to lay out all of your junk box supplies or your egg drop supplies, whatever you choose, like a store, and have different groups come up and purchase, quote unquote, their materials using a number of points or dollars that you have set. There's a link handy here that has the budget worksheet all laid out for a possible start. The kitchen sink idea is great if you just have a lot of stuff and maybe not a lot of kids, and a wide variety of age groups. It's the same idea as a junk box challenge, though you might put out a lot more softer items like felt and a lot of egg crates and different things that might protect an egg when it falls. You'll get all sorts of different designs on this. If you have more stuff than you do kids, it's fun to let them try different tacks at this. So like trying one that has a parachute and trying one that just insulates, and seeing if they can figure out any real world correlations, like if, which one is more like a seatbelt or an airbag, and which one is like, an actual parachute. How do those work, and how can we make those work for our eggs? I snuck in a couple right here at the end. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to sneak them in here too. These are unprograms or passive programs. These are great for solo librarians because then you don't have to think about constantly watching them. They can more or less be dealt with themselves as long as you've shown one or two people or drawn up some instructions. Button making, which is great. You give a few examples, put out a couple designs and some paper, a hole punch, and your kids will have more pins than a 90s jean jacket. I know my 90s jean jacket was covered in buttons. You can also do a community circle loom, which is made out of a hula hoop or two that you will have set up the warp for, and then left out old t-shirt pieces so they can weave them in and create a really cool circular rug. You can also do giant cross stitch using a pegboard or latch hook material, and let people and kids knitting needle. Or not knitting needle, I'm sorry, embroidery needle, the big plastic ones. And then people can practice making words, making designs, and everyone gets to work together on the same thing. Thank you so much for listening. Were 5 really quick ideas. I'm happy to answer more questions. I post a lot of things on that blog and talk a lot on that Twitter, so I hope to hear from some of you soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. We always love hearing from you. You have a lot of great ideas, and I hope people got inspired. And if they have more questions, I'm curious about that cross stitch. So maybe people can have some more questions about that. But you can go ahead and keep posting those if you have questions about details about the programs, or how she got started doing this in a solo way, then you can ask about those things. But let's go ahead and move on to Laura, unless you have anything, Kristin.
No, I just really want to thank Stephanie, because every time we see her, we are excited about the ideas she's coming up with. And also to mark that she was really in on the ground floor. The work happening in Pittsburgh was some of the very earliest making in library work that was happening with youth. A lot of the earlier maker stuff was with adults. And so she has a lot of street cred and experience in this. And she's also the librarian who is enrolled in the YX program at the University of Maryland, which is an online program to really look at what is the future of youth services. And are the applications out now for that, Stephanie?
I believe so.
So I think they're taking new recruits now, and the woman coordinating it, Megha Subramanian, is top notch. So if you're looking to expand, that might be a way to get some continuing education, and definitely ask Stephanie about that. Now, before we bring Laura on, so while Laura is setting up her screen sharing, we do want to let you know that Laura is reporting that in Niles, Michigan, down by South Bend, Indiana, there is record flooding today, and some of the library has been evacuated to the basement. So we're going to hopefully hope that the power stays on long enough for Laura's talk. If for any reason she's interrupted, we will scooch on. We'll ask Jimmy to step in a little bit early, and we're so grateful, Laura, that you're hanging in there with us when the weather's so rotten.
Well,
go ahead.
Actually, the library is safe. It's the rest of the city that's crumbling, and so they've been evacuated to the library because we are still the safe space, which I think rocks anyhow.
And it's definitely worth. I mean, every presenter that you've seen today has brought something unique and special to the discussion. I think that these final 2, I know you're thinking like Dinner's Coming, are definitely worth tuning into because of what they're trying to achieve on such limited budgets. And especially, I mean, what Laura really brings to the table is a really deep caring and concern for those who may not be at the center of society's priorities. And it's always a real inspiration to hear you, Laura. So,
oh, that's so sweet.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry I've been hit and miss on your presentations because of the chaos happening here, but there have been. My notes are just insane already. So I'm really humbled and excited to be here in a group like this. My name, again, is Laura Hollister. And I'll say up front, I'm not actually a librarian. I'm a community advocate that has the privilege of working in a library for the last 6 years or so. My experiential background is fairly diverse, as Kristin said. I've mostly homeschooled my 6 sons, which drove the need to find people in the community that could teach them lots of things. And to this end, I was on the advisory board for a Fab Lab about 10 years ago, back when we still had to define what that meant. I am absolutely fascinated with innovation. I hold 2 medical device patents. I became involved with FIRST Robotics about 8 years ago because, again, kids making things with adults doing it. It was just a community event that I was thrilled about. So I was actually one of the regional event coordinators for that. 3 of my 6 sons have disabilities, so we get to live in that little subworld. I spend a lot of time in programs and advocacy for that, sometimes neglected population. And my family's hosted a lot of exchange students from all over the world. So I enjoy thinking of the world as a pretty big global place. So, sorry, let's see why it's not tabbing like it's supposed to. There we go. I'm going to define the terms, although really you guys know these. I'm going to skip pretty fast. What I'm envisioning is a SkillShare space with just a classroom with tables and tools to bring people together so that they can share and learn with free workshops and activities in the library. I've seen examples where an amazing online calendar and a host application allows them to feature really interesting, free of charge opportunities to learn something new, make new connections. While one of you presenters was going, somebody came in and wanted to raise rabbits and learn how to tan hides. Like, it's just wild, the kinds of things that people are asking for. And I couldn't pull a book off the shelf for that one that was really going to mean anything to him. His reading was fairly limited. He's looking for a person to teach him this stuff. So then we would have a space like that, the Skillshare space, but then a library of things where you had the tools needed to support the programs and workshops that were being offered. And so the collections would grow based on the community, really, what kinds of skills they're offering and what kinds of spare tools they're offering. So the local context, somebody else had mentioned that too. Know what your community needs. Our town has recently struggled with a communication of needs. 2 people recently died because they fell through the social net. The furnace wasn't working. Somehow it wasn't communicated in a way that got them help. No one knew they needed a space heater while the wheels were put in motion for a furnace repair. And this has really sparked a whole lot of outcry and a desire to contribute. Because our library is seen as an intersection of both social and civic worlds, we're in a really good position to partner with area organizations to channel this little bubble of momentum into positive action going forward instead of just Facebook trolls ruling the world. The tool library in the Skillshare space is one hands-on way of doing it. Something as simple as having a space heater available for loan could literally change a life. So our town hit its peak 70 years ago, and it's dwindled like a lot of other small towns in Michigan. And we're transforming from a community with good paying manufacturing jobs to mostly a bedroom community with a lot of transportation service jobs. Homes are reasonably affordable, but wages are pretty low. Most of the homes are in the $50,000 to $90,000 range, which, you know, you're doing a lot of DIY projects really in that range. And nearly half of our housing market is in rental properties. It's just a really strange thing. Our household incomes, you know, that little orange line is the rest of the country. The gray line is us. The largest share of our households have an income in the under 10,000 range. Most of us don't have a lot of disposable income for hiring contractors for needed maintenance and improvements in our homes. And we're also kind of independent, and we prefer DIY projects, but with some guidance and some tools. So why am I proposing this at the library? Well, you've probably got Chilton's manuals, you've probably got DIY solar books, homesteading information, household repair guides. Community is already coming to us for information, and this is simply another way to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and materials. And it provides an amazing opportunity for intergenerational programming too. I mean, can't you picture a retired shade tree mechanic teaching a 16-year-old how to change the spark plugs in his old heap? My son might be that 16-year-old. And if anybody knows how to adjust a carburetor, I would love to know. So we are already one of the few public places that doesn't have a commercial expectation. We're trusted to provide information and resources. And so the vision is unchanged. A SkillShare space and a library of things are just different ways to fulfill that mission. We've chosen to build on our practical skill sessions that are already popular by adding the tools to do those things for checkout. We've done it on a really soft, low level, like the knitting group that meets weekly. We've also got some knitting kits that can go out with some instructions and basic tools to be able to do some things, donated yarn, that kind of thing. But we want to expand that, both the depth and the breadth of this collections. And so each sub-collection in my vision will have like an advocate or a curator or overseer or champion. And that term really doesn't work exactly right. And so in the chat box, if you could throw alternative suggestions, I'd really appreciate it. And so while many makerspaces and Fab Labs are promoting exploration and innovation, we've chosen to address programs and projects that affect quality of life for adults. So we've had a really good response to our cooking sessions in the past 6 months, and we plan on building on those with some of the patron suggested topics, like the ones you see on the screen. Previous sessions included blender battles, microwave tricks and treats, crockpot sides, holiday candy making, smoothies with Miss Tara, meatless marvels, and next month is stupendous sushi with Chef Dacia Amster. Then this summer quarter is going to focus on household plumbing, both repair and improvements. And this is the first one in our home maintenance series, primarily because we've got a local plumber who's a regular patron, and he's getting ready to retire. He says, you know what, I would love to be able to teach somebody else. And I've got a backup set of tools that once I'm retired, I'll keep my good tools and I'll have some available. So he's got these grand plans to build a bathroom from the joists up. He's going to do it on wheels so that we can wheel it out there and a session at a time, learn how the bathroom goes together. So you can learn how to install and repair as you go. So down the road, we've got a lot of other things that have been suggested. We've had some of the big brainstorming sessions with the community. There's been strong support for it. It's just taken us a couple of years to actually start creating the space and the infrastructure to be able to handle it. But the things like a seed library curated by the Niles Community Gardens with support from the Fernwood Botanical Garden, or a series on marketing for artists and crafters, including how to do good write-ups, a light box that we could make there in the SkillShare space and have available to check out. We've got a local artist, and she owns 2 businesses that's willing to teach that shop. She's demonstrated success in that area. Somebody teaching us how to install and repair drywall and do basic household electrical maintenance. Those are the kinds of programs we're aiming for. So the logistical details, though. We don't have staffing to open another always open service desk. Our director is firm. If there is a service desk, it is staffed. So we can't do that all the time. So we're going to make it like a branch inside the library that's going to be staffed by volunteers for the most part. Those area leads, champions, whatever we come up with, we'll have to somehow create the infrastructure for volunteers to help make this work. And it'll have its own hours. So again, we can facilitate doing it with the volunteers. For circulation, we're going to start with a 1-week checkout, renewable once, assuming it wasn't on hold, and a daily overdue fine equal to about 10% of the item's value, something like that. We'll see what happens and keep making adjustments. Now, we're creating 3 different collections, though, so that we can break the things into groups that are representative of their potential danger. I'm thinking right now it's probably going to be green, yellow, red because it's intuitive. So green level tools will be things that aren't dangerous at all, like candy molds, okay? Yellow level, safe with reasonable precautions, like a drill or a hammer. Red tools carry more risk, like a circular saw. I've kind of joked the flamethrower, and it's kind of interesting how many people aren't sure whether I'm kidding. Anyway, there'll be patron account types that'll correspond, and as you've done your competence test, we'll change your account type so that you can now check out level 2 tools or level 3 or green or red or whatever they are. There's a lot of really good waivers and legalese boilerplate out there. I'm just going to shamelessly grab those and ask if I can steal them, and we'll have patrons sign them annually when they renew their card. The workshops that you need to do to demonstrate or acquire competence will be led by those area champions or possibly the CTE students as a class project. The local high school is very interested in working with us. There's been some staff turnover there, so I'm not exactly sure where they're at now, but it is a really intriguing possibility. We don't actually have a budget, like at all. I think I could squirrel some out of programs if I absolutely had to, but at this point, I'm trying to make this thing self-sufficient. And so the specific tool stock is going to be driven by the community desire and need and donations. And we have it set up so that the donations do become the property of the library, with the one exception of tools owned by the school district if they do house them here. And the check-in inspections will be coordinated by the area leads or champions. These are a few of the more prominent inspirations, but there are lots of others programs that look just as amazing. I've been stewing on this for probably 5 years, been actively working towards it for about 3, and there is absolutely no way I could pull up the entire list of articles and programs that I've read about. So many of you are doing so many cool things. So I threw this slide in just so that you'd be able to look them up later. Sorry, moving fast. Means versus ends. You know what? With this group, I really don't even have to go into it. Just consider this a gratuitous Calvin and Hobbes. We're not doing this to position ourselves differently in the community. This is a means, not an ends. We want a healthy, thriving community, and so providing the space for it is just one way to reach that goal. The brownie points in the community are great, but that's not the main reason we're doing it. We are trying to guide people to outside resources, and that's part of how we're aware of what the needs are inside their homes. We have a social work intern, and we're working on developing a broader program to do that. But that is just another way that we're able to use to reach people, make them aware of the need, and then also give them a dignified place to give back. So many of these agencies are just absolutely dehumanizing, saying that we value your skill, even if your skill is how to install a doorknob. Everybody needs to be able to share something, and I think that it's absolutely critical, to individual well-being, and that means it's critical to community well-being. We're not doing it alone. Like I said, we've been about 3 years working on this. There are a few other things happening down there that I think will support it. There's the strong possibility of adult ed being housed in our basement. A local nonprofit has got a vocational skills training program that involves having 4 social enterprises, one of which is a cafe, which I think would change the vibe in the basement pretty considerably. So we're not trying to do everything. We're trying to fill in the niches in between what other organizations are doing with their missions and help support those types of things happening at this end of a very long, skinny county. Our county offices are all at the north part of the county, half an hour away. Public transportation kind of sucks. So our building's already being used as a satellite office for the county treasurer, domestic violence support groups, single parenting support groups, chemical dependence, the local mental health gateway people, they meet their clients here. We're already at an intersection where people are having physical needs met. So this isn't really that big a stretch for us. So coming back around, why are we doing it? Because it has to be done, and the community perceives the library as having the core strengths to coordinate it. We absolutely rock the facilitation of moving knowledge and things from one person to another, and we are trusted. There's a big one. We are trusted to do so in a way that benefits both parties, and we have a responsibility to use our superpowers for good. That's all I've got. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. We really love hearing from you and all the cool stuff that's going on there. We know you also had the social work intern at your library. So Kristin just commented in the chat how many social service groups are intersecting with the library there. We had a suggestion for lead advisor and superheroes instead of champions. I don't know if those
you got some good ones there.
Superpowers for good and superheroes. So that was from the Pawpaw District Library and Karen in the chat.
Thank you.
And Anne was saying how impressed she was with how tailored your offerings were to community needs. How would you recommend that maybe a librarian go about finding / being this idea of being a community advocate? Because I think people are really impressed by you, but how might they get started by doing some of these programs?
Because I was hired, my original position title was community engagement. because I'm not a librarian. I really respect the work that libraries do, and I've got something to offer there, but it is not in the materials. It is in being that conduit between the community and the library, and the information needs to flow both ways too. 'Cause I don't think libraries realize how differently they speak sometimes, and people are a little intimidated and don't understand it. But the way we've chosen to do it here is to just be there. All of our adult services team spends time in the community sitting on various boards and committees and action groups and civic organizations. We try to simply be there. And more importantly, we distribute a lot of business cards saying, if you need anything, call me. And we've kind of positioned ourselves to be the phone a friend. We don't necessarily offer the things, but we know who does. And so people have learned that they can come to us as that particular resource to find out who's doing the things in there. And that only comes about with time. We were just blessed with a director and a board who felt that it was vital that we somehow find the time for staff to be able to go out and do that. And we didn't really get traction for at least 3-4 years. And now we're almost being overwhelmed with it. And that's why we're looking at the social work intern to curate that collection of resources, the social service resources.
Laura, it's Kristin. I wonder if you would mind, this isn't quite on the maker piece, but will you talk about the one-on-one services that Niles offers its patrons? Because that's also a really important way to get to know the community's needs. And I think it's one of your hallmarks as a library.
Really, since I've only even been inside a few other libraries, I'm unaware of what's kind of weird. Our one-on-one service is, it's generally a book a librarian, but you can also book a room, or you could book a social work intern. And that's where we do provide one-on-one help. Is generally things like genealogy and how to use my Kindle and how to use my phone, but not exclusively. We can get some really crazy questions in there. And so sometimes what we're doing is, once we've got that question, if we're not the right resource to answer it, we can find the right one. And so a gentleman that had an Excel question, he was nesting a formula. It was like six parentheses deep. I had no idea how to help him at that particular level, but I happen to know somebody who is absolutely insanely good with Excel. And so we were able to get the two of them together into a study room to solve the man's problem. So we do try to do one-on-one help. It has been extremely popular, and we actually recently had to start limiting it to things that we're not already offering classes in, because people would prefer to get their basic computing from us one-on-one, but we simply didn't have the staff resources to do it. So we ask, if it's a basic computing question, you take the class first, and then we'll work with you afterwards to try to help get you where you need to be with your specific questions.
Great. And I also just want to echo how many things you have going on there. When you guys made space available for us to teach in this summer, I could not believe how many people came in looking for an event that you had relocated to someplace else. So the ways in which the library is making itself available to groups, especially to groups that are not always, that require a little more confidentiality, that are, sometimes quite personal needs. It's a really amazing thing that you do. So
well, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was going to say it's really gratifying to hear that, because sometimes it can be difficult. Some of the organizations can be hard to work with. It's a lot easier to offer a service on your own than it is to manage the service being offered by an outside facility. And I've been doing that for about 5 years, and it is very much like herding cats, and especially when you're working with governmental systems, there is so many layers of redundancy and difficulty. And did they send a check for the room, or did they? It's difficult. And if you're a director, all I can say is that my director is the most wonderful woman ever placed in a library. I'm sorry, I'm sure you're wonderful too, but she found ways to give us the time and to recognize how difficult it is to do that. And so just giving us the ability to spend the time with our communities is game changing completely.
That's great. Stephanie, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Laura had just said near the end of her presentation about everybody's got something to share, and how you've seen that either in your youth or in your community. I think I might have to unmute you here, so go ahead, Stephanie.
All right. Yeah, I was actually looking at the link that Laura had sounded out as part of her presentation because I'm really, really intrigued by everything she's just said. But everybody has something to share is something I've seen that in kind of patron-driven programming. I've seen it from Dungeons and Dragons groups that my teens have started and self-run, which spun off into make a mascot. So they all sewed stuffed animals that could be mascots for this Dungeons and Dragons thing. I've seen lots of parents, when they see what I'm trying to do, come up and give me suggestions about how we could alter a program. And I frequently will just encourage them, if we're in a public area, to sit down and make something too. And the kids, just like when they watch me, they watch the other adult or the teenager make something different, something new, and they add that new technique in. I see that a lot in all sorts of kind of freestanding informal environments, both in museums and libraries.
Yeah, I love that patron-driven patron-driven activities and programming that happens there. Are there any other questions in the chat that anyone had?
Really quick, I did want to mention, because the YX program came up a couple times, the deadline was extended. I'm a real slacker and didn't know, but you have until February 28th if you're interested in applying for the program. It's at yx.umd.edu, which I will drop in the chat.
And what were some of the highlights for you from doing that in the first cohort?
They are really passionate about using design thinking and what the thought processes that underlie the maker movement, and looking at how we can apply those not just to projects here at the library, but into our practice in general. How can we work with the community better? How can we find out where kids are in their learning process and connect to that? How can we engage peers to be mentors for each other and for young? A lot of really interesting learning happening out, everything from how children at different age groups learn and different learning theories, right on up to how to practice a collaborative design project in libraries for organizations. So it's really interesting. I encourage anyone who's interested to check it out.
We just had some questions about the tuition, and like if you get in, it's a free ride sort of thing. Is that correct?
Not anymore.
Okay.
That was only for the first cohort, because we were kind of guinea pigs, and in return for being guinea pigs, they had received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services for us. I'm not entirely sure on the tuition.
Okay.
But they would have the information on scholarships and things like that as well. They had an information session that is posted at that link that Kristin posted better than I did. And so the information webinar is still up there for people to watch at their convenience.
And can you give people any tips on applying, what they're looking for?
If you are somebody who is interested enough to come and watch this and participate in this conference, you have some idea of the value of design thinking and making, and they're really looking for people who want to push youth services forward in a real solid learning direction, and everyone here, I think, has that interest. So I don't know that I have any specific how-tos, but I think that anybody who is hearing this just should at least look into it.
Yeah, that's great. Laura, we have about 4 more minutes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share about the overlap between makerspaces and SkillShare?
I find it interesting how the community is responding to just the little teasers that I've had out there and like Facebook conversations. A gentleman came in here today because he thought that, I don't know, it doesn't matter, but he's essentially got like a little commune running out at his place, and he's all excited about being able to teach kinds of different things. And it just comes up so often. People say, oh, I wish I could check out a tool to do that. Or could you guys do a program on that? Because our adult programming side, we do probably about 60 programs a month. We are a single facility. We've got a staff of about 25-ish, I think, counting housekeeping and everything. But it's still kind of a lot. But patrons have gotten very accustomed to that idea of making suggestions on what they can do and then offering to help do them, because we just don't have the staff to run everything here. We facilitate the community doing things here. They're on board with that. And I think that that's what's going to make this possible. I think if we were trying to run it any other way in this community, it probably wouldn't really go. So it's just fun to see people's eyes light up when they come up with something to either share or learn.
Yeah, I just love hearing both of your all's ideas every time we get the chance to hear them, and I'm glad that we could spread that around a little bit today. And you can see that it's sharing skills, it's sharing knowledge, it's helping kids share their interests with other kids and be that facilitator for the community, as Laura was saying there at the end.
Exactly.
So we're really happy to have you guys on, and we have your slides up at the conference link so people can peruse those and contact you if they have advice or suggestions. And we really just want this conference to be that same sort of exchange of knowledge. So we've got our final presenter coming up here. Kristin, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I just am excited at all the variety of perspectives we've heard, all from the same state.